This podcast is brought to you by Mad Company, a non-profit theater company based out of New York City.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of One Hale of a Conversation. My name is James Hale. I am your once and future host for this podcast. I have the remarkable pleasure of being able to sit here in our new recording setup with my good friend Marco Voli. Hello, Marco.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's good, man. I'm happy to be here. This setup is super comfortable.
Thank you. Yeah, since you can't see us because it's a podcast, we are on a couch now instead of relatively uncomfortable chairs. So right away, we see improvement.
Score.
So, Marco, we met at Lambda. You were on the 2-year MFA program.
Yeah.
My 1 year there was your first year there.
Mm-hmm.
So you really got the brunt of COVID.
Yeah. I mean, kind of, right? Because it's sort of, COVID happened in my third term. And so it was like third term, fourth term were pretty remote, you know?
Sure.
I actually moved back for a second and stayed at a friend's house in Seattle.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So it was weird hours, right? Because I was sort of keeping up with London time in PST. But honestly, like, my opinion on it is I actually feel really lucky that it happened when it happened.
Okay.
Because most of my training, like the training part of the 2-year MFA course was done. And it was before the structural changes happened at Lambda. So,
right.
Yeah.
A whole other conversation.
Absolutely. But I still got like so much in-person time with like really, really, really incredible professors. So I guess I'm probably glass half fulling it.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I mean, I actually felt, while it sucked to have that disruption, the time that I had there was still so valuable.
Right.
And I sort of went, well, this is happening. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than my acting training.
Right. I have no control.
Yeah. And, like, it was a pandemic that happened. It affected all of our lives. And, we've gotten ill. We've lost loved ones. In comparison to that, I was like, well, if my education gets slightly altered in the grand scheme of things,
right.
It's nothing for me to complain too much about.
Oh, it's a very enlightened view to take.
I was just the only enlightened view you get.
Well, fair. I was just overcome with rage the whole time. But that's just me. We met at Lambda. You are originally from Nicaragua.
I am.
I believe this is correct. You were living in Seattle before Lambda. Is that where you grew up? Is that where you consider you're from? Like,
kind of. So I was born in Managua, Nicaragua, but then my family moved to a finca, which is sort of like a large plot of land where my father grew tobacco. But we moved to Seattle at 7. A hurricane had hit and just really destroyed my dad's crop. And he had borrowed some money from some people who weren't going to be very enlightened or understanding. So we kind of had to flee. But then, eventually my dad was able to pay them back, and I sort of went and visited Nicaragua, once or twice a year to see my sister and family until I was about 11. I'm not sure what happened then, but it just got a little more complicated.
Sure. Your sister and family were still in Nicaragua? Your sister didn't go with you, or was she older? Or?
So my dad and my brother, they left first, because my brother at the time was 20, and it sort of felt like if anybody was going to be targeted, it would be my dad or my brother. Where I was just a kid.
Sure.
I was 6 when they left, 7 when I left, and yeah. Then my mom and I hung out in Jalapa, which is a town where we had our house, and then we left and kind of met them once they had landed and found jobs and a place to live,
established themselves. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. But then, I grew up in Seattle. So I guess I consider myself from Nicaragua, and I am Nicaraguan, but I also consider myself white American because I don't have an accent, and I went, I did most of my primary education and high school and everything, and even my undergrad in Seattle. So yeah, I do have like a attachment to being a Seattleite.
Sure.
Pacific
Some pride
Northwester.
there.
Yeah.
Excellent.
You know, flannels and Doc Martens.
Grunge.
And, yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah, so you got your BFA from Cornish College of the Arts.
I did.
The BFA in original
hens.
works. Wait, really? Hens?
No, we just
The
made
Cornish
that up.
hens?
I don't actually think that's...
Oh my God, I wish that were true. That would be my new favorite mascot instantly.
It could be. You have to fact check it. We just called it that.
That's amazing. BFA in original works.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen someone else that I talked to recently, might have been Mick, also got a BFA in original works, or maybe Helena, I don't remember. Just walk me through the differences between a BFA in like fine arts in theater and a BFA in specifically original works. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. So the way Cornish works is that it's a full-on art school. So like, you know, there's people who are studying music, who are studying fine art, who are studying design, dance, production design, film, etc. And in the theater part of that program, the first 2 years are pretty homogenous.
Right.
You kind of take a lot of the basics.
Right. Your core curriculum, whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a 4-year program. On your third year, you get to kind of pick a route, and the sort of straight acting route is one way to go. Then you had the musical theater route, which was a very different curriculum.
Yeah.
And then you had the original works route, which was kind of cool because it was everything that the straight acting route did. And on top of that, you took classes in directing and classes in playwriting.
Wow. Okay.
So it definitely added on quite a lot, pretty busy years. I think there was just the only thing that was different is that there was one time where the straight acting course did a play, and then the original works course we wrote and then handed off our writing to somebody, directed somebody else's writing, like a short 15-minute kind of one act.
Sure.
So we wrote something, somebody directed it. We directed something that somebody else wrote, and then we also acted in whatever we were cast in.
Right.
And that was a really cool experience.
Yeah.
And I think for me, just the concept of having a more holistic understanding, especially like in theater. I wasn't thinking about film at that time then, if I'm being honest. I was really, really just nerding out on theater.
Sure.
And so the idea of like, reading books and understanding what it means to direct something for the stage, how does directing, influence what audiences ultimately see? Obviously that's huge.
Right.
But to have a more in-depth and practiced understanding of that was really important to me. And I also just, I love writing. I still do. And for that to be fit into my schedule felt like a really good structure for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you going to Lambda for the MFA and as a working actor now, you definitely pursued the acting side of all those experiences. Was there ever a time that you thought, I actually want to move more into directing? Do you envision yourself one day moving towards directing, writing,
maybe
producing, any of that?
Yeah. So I started a theater company with some friends in Seattle back in the day called the Core Ensemble.
Very
where cool. I'd written a couple shows for, and I actually, I wrote this 30-minute multimedia one act, and directed that and produced that, and it was a super valuable experience.
Yeah.
While I love directing, and there's so much creative specificity that you can have on a show when you're the director, right? You can really craft a vision and work with your different designers and your actors and your different performers in whatever way that means. And you can really, really shape and build something to your tastes. While it's collaborative, it is one of the, I think, most definitive sort of positions in that art form. It's also just a lot of like leadership. And I love just being able to kind of do my job and get lost in it.
Right.
And, be sort of playful with it and silly with it and neurotic with it, if that's what it calls for.
Sure.
And I think that in directing, you have to compose yourself in a different way because there's so many more people who are relying on you to also be mediator and to have a really clear head. And I think as an actor, you have to behave yourself with professionalism, but you can really be focused and idiosyncratic onto the needs of that one particular job.
Absolutely.
And that sort of, that, going deeper into that versus having what's the word I'm looking for? A sort of larger point of view.
Right. The wider viewpoint.
Yeah.
Sure.
That just felt more, that called me more.
Absolutely.
And I also found work. So I was like, this is great.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we don't talk about enough, especially as I talk to some actors, they are hyper focused on becoming the best actor that they can be, actor full stop, which at a certain level is admirable. You know what you want to do, you know what you're called to do. But I think one of the benefits of a liberal education, a BFA in fine arts, is that you often are exposed to these other sides of largely theater, but some programs do go into film or other media. It's
such an interesting thing. I think every actor wants to be the best actor that they can be. Right. Like, what does that mean though? Right. You know what I mean? Because you can practice a certain set of skills or a certain technique or build a certain taste, but you can only really be the best actor for whatever role you're playing at that time.
Sure. You can do the best job with this material that you can do.
Yeah. I guess, I'm sure Daniel Day-Lewis would be great in a buddy comedy with but Jack Black is going to be amazing at that. Right. But also we don't necessarily, I'm not sure if Jack Black could bring what Daniel Day-Lewis brought to There Will Be Blood.
I would love to see the Jack Black Lincoln.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be incredible. Someone make that, please. I just think there's so much value in an actor or any creative being able to step into another role, even if it's briefly, even if it's not necessarily a very fun experience. I know for myself, moving more into a producing role with Mad Company, that I still feel myself as an actor first and foremost, but having now gotten so much experience with kind of every other part of the creative process, I don't know that it's made me a more skilled actor. My accents aren't any better. My physical body isn't more expressive because of the production that I've done, but I'm a much better employee. I'm a much better artist. I understand the medium of theater and everything else that we've worked in so much better. And that, I think, is still super valuable. So when I hear an actor or someone who moves to the city and just starts taking acting classes, wants to be an actor, I always think that's great and you totally need to do that, but you also need to immerse yourself into everything else because it's so much bigger than just your role within it. And moving around to all the different parts that make art happen gives you a full appreciation of what it is that we actually do, I think.
Yeah. Alan Rickman has a really great quote about that, where he's talking about advice to young actors. Okay. And, I'm not going to, this is not a quote because I can't remember it word for word.
Paraphrasing.
Yeah. But, essentially he's he told his young actors who were asking him for advice, make sure to forget about acting here and there as well, because it's, to be an actor, a lot of what it is beyond the craft of it is your cumulative experience as a human being, right? The lived in specificity of your perspective. And I think that's really true. And, being involved in other elements of what it takes to make a production or make a film are going to give a very, very, much more specific to the task understanding of what goes into that. But it also just allows you to see things in different ways and gives you new experiences that you're then immediately correlating to what you do. Right. So everybody should do it. I think everybody should give it a shot.
Do everything.
Yeah.
Do everything.
Yeah. Do everything.
So you do it all. That's our advice on this podcast.
No.
So what year is it? It's 2023. You graduated 2021. We did our showcase together. You got signed out of showcase. And then in the last couple of years, you've done a decent amount of work.
Yeah.
What I don't know how I'm phrasing this question, but how has your experience been just as an acting gun for hire? You've been several different stages all around. You've been in these kind of random shows. How is the experience of actually working? been compared to all the training that we have in the...
I mean, great. On like the most basic level, it's nice to get paid to do what you do, and instead of paying to do what you do. Yep. But it's been really incredible. I really feel just super fortunate, especially because, you know, my wife works remotely, so she's been able to kind of join me through all of that. When you're freelancing in the theater, you often will have to travel places, right? So the last 3 shows, I traveled to Seattle, I traveled to Florida, I traveled to Minneapolis, which was also like a, you know, kind of, when you're working on a project, like you have like the text and the demands of that project, but then for like your own work to be in a new environment is just so incredible, because you're going to get different stimuluses in just your day-to-day life that are going to impact whatever you put into that. And that feels like a really great way to break any like habits or any ideas of what I have about a role before I get there. And then once I get there, it's like, you know, a bunch of new people, a totally new place.
Right.
There's just a lot of different things to contend with. And I think no matter what, like subconsciously that is going to seep into your work. You know, when I did Native Gardens in Florida,
yep.
I was in this like townhome, and the company gave me a car, and I was like, oh, like, you know, I went from, before that I was bartending in New York, and that's a very different lifestyle, bartending in Manhattan to working on a theater project.
Daily experience is vastly different between,
And the character I played is quite a suburban character, Pablo. He's a lawyer, newly married. He's about to have a kid, and I sort of, you know, would get into my car in the morning and, you know, kiss my wife goodbye after making her breakfast. I'd go to work. I'd go to rehearsals, right, and then I'd stop by the grocery store on my way back home, so I can make Hannah dinner. And I was like, but I'm living in a much more suburban way right now than I would be if I was doing this show off Broadway, right?
Yeah.
And that element of it I found really fascinating, because it helped me really like ground myself in the day-to-day life of things. And I wasn't expecting that, you know. I wasn't like coming into it like I'm gonna, you know, be suburban.
Right. I'm gonna method act the whole time.
No, but you know, when things happen like that, it's like what a gift. Yeah. What a total gift. Like, you know, the universe in this way is conspiring. It's giving me tools that I can take from to just find a new perspective that I might not have had.
Yeah, that's really the difference between mounting a play like that here or something and then doing it in Florida. I can imagine would be vastly different experiences, and so useful to be able to bring that in to your own technique. Do you approach maybe initially every role in a similar way? Do you feel like you read a text and then follow similar pathways to get where you want to go, or does something else happen?
Like on the most rudimentary level, like sure, because it's like, you know, I get it. I'll usually read it like once and try really, really hard not to like have a super distinct opinion about it that I can't like shake off.
Sure.
But then I think the real answer is no. It's like I usually start with like just trying to figure out like just what is my character, like what's his perspective on like whatever's going on and about life, and you know, how's his colon. I don't like what, but like I mean, kind of like to a degree. It's like, you know, just I once I read it, I kind of try and just like, you know, figure out who that person is, and then it's about like what's the tone, what do we find in the rehearsal room, what are the things that I've missed, like really making sure that any inspiration that I got from reading it or thinking about it isn't so defined or set in that something else can't come around that might alter that. And like that's the fun part, because we learned a lot of techniques at Lambda, right? And I think most modern acting trainings are an accumulation of many different techniques, all of which are awesome. Like I think, you know, Michael Chekhov has as much to say as Meisner, as Stanislavski, as whatever, right? As Strasberg. I mean, whatever it is that you follow or what you like all these things are just different ways in.
Right. They're getting to the same place.
Yeah. But yeah, I think like the character and the process, the tone, the people around you, that's what informs me. So yeah, that was an answer. That was an answer.
No, totally. Because I've talked to some people And it seems especially at Lambda, you're totally right. We learned a whole bunch of different techniques with the name of the guy or the woman who sort of originated it. And we learned them all very specifically, but then we were encouraged to sort of work in whatever way. I've met a lot of actors who were not as fortunate to get that sort of breadth of theatrical training and all these different techniques. So they're familiar with maybe one or two. You know, at their undergrad, they did Meisner and a little bit of Chekhov. Mm-hmm. At the studio they work at now, it's strictly method, whatever it is. And so then they use that as their way in, and it's a very specific way in. And I have yet to decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm always envious of them because it's so clear what they have to do to get where they want to go. They have, you have step A, you have step B, you have step C. And then if it works, great. If it didn't work, you have these other pathways that your training has given you. And I feel like with us, having all of these different things, it can be kind of difficult to choose, like, what tool do I get out of the toolbox for this?
I guess, yeah. I mean, and I'm just speaking for myself, but like, I just want to make sure that I know, exactly that, like, there are technical things that you need to be exact about, right?
Right. You
need to find what, if you're working with any kind of physical impairment or gestural language or whatever, those things can be shifted, but like, you do eventually, want to have a really solid foundation on those things, right? On the text, like, obviously, like, if you don't know what you're saying, like, don't tell me if you don't know.
Yeah.
As the audience, but like, whatever needs to be done for me to feel a really, really like solid foundation that I can then just be in that moment and exist as that person and, allow my synapses to fire so that whatever's happening can happen. Like, that's what matters, So it's like, if when I remember in college one time, I was playing Baloo the bear in Jungle Book. And like, I was having a kind of a hard time. I felt like it was sort of like a children's theater kind of style. But I just thought that I was kind of I was being a little too like polite with it.
Sure.
And I didn't feel that I was giving the gruffness of the jungle for a children's show as a bear.
Tough line to walk there. But.
Right. So I set up a can of sardines in a studio, and I crawled around like a bear and then ate the can of sardines while pretending to be a bear. That's ridiculous, right? I'm not gonna do that for
right. Pablo doesn't need that probably in his suburban home.
No, he doesn't. But that actually, like, even though I felt like a total idiot and was like, what am I doing? It actually helped me so much. Yeah. With Pablo, it was like really making a point of like keeping my facial hair in a very particular way and having like a ceremony of like being meticulous with my grooming, that, that part of it really set me up for that day.
Right.
So I think it's like whatever. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to be limited in that way. Like, because nobody wants to get stuck.
No.
And like, it's a subjective art form. It's not a science, necessarily. Right. So like, to treat it with that kind of rigidity, while it can bring really great results, it's just like kind of would also take some of the fun out of it for me.
Right. So you're there for the exploration, and you don't so much care how it happens as long as eventually you get to where you want to go. Cool.
Absolutely. So long as nobody's getting hurt and you're being like a good collaborator and a kind person.
Sure. Right.
Right.
Being a good castmate.
Yeah. Do whatever you want.
I love that. So in pre-Lambda, and I assume post Cornish, go Hens.
Go Hens.
You had a bunch of work at different theaters in Seattle. There's stuff from the Seattle Shakespeare Company, Seattle Public Theater, Seattle Rep, Strawberry Theater Workshop. Is that in Seattle?
Yeah, it is.
Strawberry.
They're actually a really amazing company that have survived the pandemic.
Oh, amazing.
And if any of the listeners are ever in Seattle, just such a shout to that theater company. They do incredible work, really incredible work, all in studios.
Amazing.
But yeah, just some of my favorite shows I've ever seen in my life have been there.
Very cool. So all that work pre-Lambda, and then in the last couple of years, a good amount of work post-Lambda. Do you notice a big shift in how you used to work and how you work now? Did it change how you approached the role, or did it just give you a better understanding of what you were doing, or something else?
Yeah, no, I guess both. It gave me a way bigger toolkit. I also felt like, and I'm sure, there'll be some teachers who will hear this and get mad at me, but I did have to like unlearn a couple of things as well. When like Lambda has this incredible foundation in pure movement and pure voice, which are really wonderful things. And part of pure movement, right, is the Alexander technique and understanding, how to be neutral in your body. And that's a wonderful thing. And also, like, if I'm watching a show and everybody's has a perfectly aligned spine, I just don't buy that, it's a bunch of truck drivers, like, or whatever. So, taking some of there is a way to do it out of it was really important, because like again, like, it's just back to like whatever that project is, whatever that character is, like, that's what it needs to be.
Right.
Not whatever my idea of acting is, or my idea of a great performance is, or my idea of what's going to make me look good or cool, or this casting director is going to like me if they see this show because I'm behaving in this way. Like, all like that doesn't matter at all. So yeah, I mean, I learned so much. I got significantly better after Lambda. I did. Lambda helped me open my heart and my body and my voice. In ways I hadn't known before. And like that, having that expanded of a toolkit of like knowing that my body can transform in this way, that it can be physically expressive in this way, that it doesn't need to be pared down to my taste. It can be authentic. It can be coming from a place of inspiration and from the gut. Like, that does take time and work, and that's one of the really beautiful things about that program, is that is instilled into you. Right. You spend so much time like, crying because you didn't flick the air in an emotionally expressive enough way or whatever, but
that's a real thing, y'all. That's a real experience.
Lobbin, shout out. But I am so grateful for my time there, because it just opened me up to be able to do so much more and to allow for so much more. I think that's the biggest thing. It's like what I could allow for, expanded, which sounds like quite esoteric, but it's not. It's like we have the little voice in our head that always happens when we're performing, right? That guides us and our performance when we're thinking, no matter what, there's a little bit of us that's thinking about what we're doing when we're performing. So often in life, though, yes, there's that, but sometimes things happen that break that social construct down, and then we are just behaving because we are motivated to behave for whatever reason that may be. And Lambda and the training we got there really highlighted that can happen in a performance if you are allowing for your body to be free enough, for your voice to be free enough.
Getting out of your own way a little bit.
Yeah, and surprising yourself, and then you can keep it if you liked it, or don't if you don't.
Right,
but,
you still have choice.
Yeah, but yeah, that was really like a big takeaway from Lambda, is just connecting, my thoughts with my emotions and with my body, and then just working to be free enough within whatever construct we've created that I can still surprise myself, and something really genuine can happen, Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Thanks, man.
Go Lambda.
Yeah. Go Lambda.
They taught us well. We appreciate that. So what's next? What are you looking forward to? Where do you want to go? What roles do you want? Who are you hoping calls you tomorrow or this afternoon?
Well, I really want to work in film. That's really just a big goal of mine.
Sure.
Whenever that happens, just because I want that experience, and I think because pretty much all of my work, I've done a little bit, but pretty much all of my work has been in the theater. Yeah. I want the experience of what that is like. But what's funny is that like I think I want it to be a film that also feels like theater, where it's like you still have scenes where you
want the best of both worlds.
I do. I'm really excited for equitable and ethical agreements to to be made.
Yeah.
So so that our industry can begin to pick up again.
Yeah, ready for the SAG strike at this point to end.
Yeah. I mean, so like, let me ask you that question. Like, do you think about, because I don't know if I do. I don't know if I like sometimes I'll read a role and I'll go like, oh yeah, like I want to play this. You know, like I'm inspired by it. It connects with me.
Right.
But like, do you think about like, oh, I would love to play Iago, or I would love to play a villain in a whodunit, you know? Like,
yeah.
I would love to play a villain in a whodunit.
Right.
So if anybody's casting for that.
I'm here. Yeah, there's definitely a handful of roles that I think I very much want to do, partly just because there's a part of me that like I want to stand on a stage and say these lines. I want to be John Proctor at the end of 2 hours of The Crucible and be able to say, I can't do this because it's my name. Like I think that would just be an incredible experience to go through for myself. Let alone being a part of a show like that. I think would be so cool. But there are moments in plenty of shows, a lot of Shakespeare. You know, I would do any Shakespearean part ever, which is maybe not a dream role so much as just I want to work thing. A lot of what I think about though, and might not be the healthiest approach, is instead of like, this is what I really want to do, I'm motivated more by like, I hope to do this soon, because if I don't, I might not be able to. If I don't play Hal in Henry IV, I might not get a chance to, because he's a young man. I am not Benjamin Button. I'm getting older. Right, like right. There is a handful of people. Sir Ian McKellen just played Romeo at 82 or however old he is. Really? Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It was a whole, was it Romeo or was it Macbeth? I can't remember. I didn't see the show. It was on the West End, but regardless, Sir Ian McKellen can do whatever he wants. Not being him, there's a little part of me that has this fear of like the ticking clock. Like I want to play Hal. I want to play Romeo. I want to play whatever character it is who is, generally it's an age thing, who's a younger man. Yeah. And especially on stage, like those moments are moving away. I want to play Biff in Death of a Salesman. Yeah. And at a certain point,
I was going to say How to Succeed in Business.
I mean, similar shows. But yeah, so definitely like things that I really want to play because they're beautiful. Also things that I want to have played. You know, I want to reach a certain point in my life and be like, yes, I have played all of these Shakespearean or classical works as a young man because I was appropriate for them then.
I get haunted by Shakespearean roles.
How do you mean?
Like when I finish like I'll just use real examples. Pablo in Native Gardens, right? Like I did that, you know, and maybe it's because it's so recent, but like I feel like I did that. I don't necessarily like, would I do it again? I would love to. What a great role.
Right.
But I'm also like, yeah, you know, I did that. I'm sure there's things I, you know, could have done better, and I'm sure I could have gone deeper and et cetera. Right. But I do feel a sense of like, you know, not something that's quantitative or qualitative. I'm not like, oh, I want to go back and do it better. But I'm like, no, I did that. I really felt like I gave myself to it. And again, I'm sure there's things I would have done differently.
Right.
But with Shakespearean roles, I'm like, oh man, like I need to play that again. You know, like I played Romeo when I was 21, and I did it for 4 months, and it was awesome. And I had a great team, and it was. Yeah, but I'm like...
Was this at Seattle Shakes?
Yeah, it was their educational touring production.
Wow.
So we went all across the state of Washington, into Idaho.
Oh, that's so cool.
Played for different communities and a lot of schools.
4-month tour is significant.
Yeah. It was a lot of time on the road. We all got pretty cranky at each other.
I can imagine, yeah.
But it was a lovely team. But that's like a role where I'm like, I wish I could play it again now. Yeah. You know, because I see this and that in it, and I didn't have that perspective that I have now. Or like I just played Giacomo in Cymbeline, and that's another one where I'm like, you know.
Wish I could have that back.
Yeah.
Wish I knew now what I didn't know then.
And I'm not somebody who like, I'm like, oh, like doing classical texts means more to me than doing modern texts because it doesn't. For me, it doesn't. But I do think there's something about Shakespeare and some of those meaty roles where you're like, there's just so much in there that, like, as I develop as a human being and my understandings and my perspectives change, the idea that I could go back and do that again in a different way with my new perspective,
right?
That's like, oh, I'd love that, you know. But that only happens if the stars align.
Yeah, it's a rare thing. I was just having a conversation yesterday with a director friend of mine, Denitsa, who as we were just chatting, we sort of stumbled on this idea of like, I am so grateful that we have Shakespeare and the Shakespearean canon as like almost like I don't know how to, like a guidepost or a yardstick over not just ourselves as actors, but also like basically the entirety of English theater, English speaking theater. You know, we can go back at any time and say, here's Romeo and Juliet. Here's what it means for me at this part in my life, for the world at this point in human history. 20 years later, here we go again. I have that, like, the play hasn't changed. We have the same text. And because it's so beautiful and, you know, the immortal words, for better or for worse, but whatever it is, and if it wasn't Shakespeare, maybe it would be something else. But we have this, like, for the last 400 years, we've been performing these shows so we can see how that's a way to measure how the world has changed. Yeah. You know, Shakespeare will never fall out of fashion while we are alive. I mean, shouldn't. That would be insane. And so
I don't think it's going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm not worried. I just didn't want to speak that into existence.
There's enough of us.
Yeah. But like we can use that as a yardstick for our own lives. You know, you played Romeo at 21, like in 10 years. If you got the chance to do it again, like what an amazing way to think, like here's where I am now, speaking the same words, doing the same show with whatever twists and turns and different stagings. Yeah. But we have that, like we can connect that. It's just comparing apples to apples. It's not apples to anything else. It is still the same words. And I love that we have that.
Yeah. It's
I'm just going to sit in that thought for a minute.
How should I get a 10-second pause?
Right. Yeah, insert commercial break. Love that.
No, but yeah, it's so saturated and it's and how it's been studied and then when you do it then also just it becomes so personal. Yeah. You know, and I think it's like it's inherent that. I think it's inherent. We as actors, like when we play a role, right? We spend a lot of time with that character's perspectives and psyches, you know, that takes up a big part of our day, and we intentionally put a lot of focus towards that. And I think that inherently changes us. Yeah. And like that's one of the most beautiful, I think, parts of choosing to pursue a career as an actor is how those works of art go on to influence your life. And that's not something you set out to do. You set out to learn your lines and your character and do a show and, you know, do the basic demands of the job. And then whatever else artistry you have and bring to that. But inherently that you leave slightly different. And I like, that is so, so cool that we get to experience that level of catharsis and self-inspection as often as we do.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Thanks, man. You're beautiful.
Thank you. We just have a couple minutes left here before we want to let everyone go. In closing, I like this question because I think it reveals a lot about people. If you had never found arts or theater, if you weren't a creative, an actor, what would you be? What would you be doing?
I think if I didn't find the arts or theater acting, I think and arts in general, right? Like
sure,
art,
interpret that how you will,
sure.
But yeah.
I don't know. You know, the younger version of me thought I would have gone into political science and been some sort of an activist of some kind. But then the older version of me would probably just have been a cook and then got tired of that because I didn't make enough money and the hours were too brutal. So then I would have been a bartender, but then I would have got tired of that because I had to talk to too many people. And then I don't know, I'd go and chop wood and raise sheep.
Hell yeah.
That's probably
live off the land.
Honestly, I mean, I don't know, but find some kind of way to make money where I can be peaceful and hang out with animals and have mountains around me and stuff.
That sounds like a beautiful life. I think you can do that and act. I think we can make that happen.
I would love to get there.
I'm going to live vicariously through you and pursue that goal.
No, we're manifesting it, right?
That's right.
That's
it's happening here.
Yeah.
Marco Voli, thank you so much for joining us.
It's also it's Marco Adiak Voli.
That's right. Marco Adiak Voli.
The middle name is important to me just because it's such a staple of my Nicaraguan side.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, no worries.
It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for joining us here on One Hale of a Conversation. Any parting wisdom you wish to leave our listeners with?
I don't know. I love you, man. Listeners, have fun. Enjoy your lives.
And there you have it. Thanks so much for listening. Tune in next time as we continue our conversations. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about any of the creatives who spoke in this episode, check out their social media links in the episode description.